This conference will now be recorded.
Hi, I'm Preston Williams, and welcome to another edition of Jazz Talk. Today on our show, we have a very special guest. I'm so excited to introduce her. This lady has been on the scene for over 35 years. She is a jazz vocalist, composer. She plays the guitar too, and she's a producer. She's worked with so many great artists, from Jerry Allen to Henry Threadgill, Wynton Marsalis, Terrence Blanchard, to name a few. And she's also a two-time Grammy award-winning artist. Please welcome to the show, Cassandra Wilson. Cassandra, welcome.
Thank you so much,
So
Preston. I love
so good to have you on today. Now when I think about you and I think about your music, people know you as a jazz singer, but when I listen to you, that's not what I hear a lot of times. I hear blues, I hear country, I hear folk, I hear everything. It's like gumbo. Now I understand that you're originally from Mississippi, and you yeah, you grew up there, and I'm just curious about your humble beginnings. How you got involved in music, just your upbringing. How did this whole thing begin? Jackson, Mississippi, correct?
Yes, Jackson,
Okay, okay,
Mississippi.
great, great.
Um, Jackson, Mississippi used to be known as the crossroads of the South.
Okay,
It's still known as that's not the official uh, motto right now, but
gotcha.
it's still, yeah, it's still referred to as the crossroads because we sit right in the middle of Memphis to the
Mm-hmm.
north,
Mm-hmm.
New Orleans to the south,
Gotcha.
Dallas to the west,
Okay.
and Atlanta to the east.
Mm. Okay. Okay.
And so there's a there's a confluence of genres that happen. And it happens, I think, throughout the region,
Mm-hmm.
really. Uh, Mississippi is kind of it's the original home of the blues,
Yes.
right?
Okay.
There's also country,
Mm-hmm.
there are funk art when I was coming up,
Mm-hmm.
R&B. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
when I would listen to the radio, I'd hear all of this music on
Mm.
the radio. And I think I just never understood that there were boundaries, that there were fences or walls between the different kinds of music that I listened to.
Interesting. Now, I know that I'm sure your father had a tremendous impact on you. I was reading, he was a music teacher and he played guitar and bass. And I was reading that when you were 5 years old, your dad is, of course, a jazz aficionado, and he brought home a Miles Davis record, Sketches of Spain. And I heard that you just kept listening to that over and over and over. And I know Miles is a big influence on you, but, what was it about that record, Cassandra, that really pulled you in and just had you listening to it over and over? Was it just was it Gil Evans' compositions? Was it Miles' trumpet playing? What was it about that record that really, sucked you in?
I think at 5 years old, I don't know if I could uh, discern whether it was Gil Evans that was
Right.
involved, but I'm trying to remember. I think that it was such a broad sound to me, and
Mm,
it
mm,
was exotic because he's integrating elements of classical Spanish music,
yes.
and because of the guitar and my
Hmm.
relationship with the guitar, even from that
Mm,
age,
hmm. Hmm.
I was pulled into it, and the arrangement of the horns. It was unusual. It was different from the rest of my father's collection,
Right.
and I think that's made me feel it was just this euphoria
Hmm.
that I experienced listening to all of these elements in the music.
Yeah. Yeah. So at age 6, you began playing piano. Tell us about that.
Let me close my browser. It's telling me to close my
Okay.
browser.
Okay.
Wait, I'm not going to lose you if I close my browser, am I
No,
now?
you're
Okay.
good.
Okay.
You're good.
Let me close Zoom too. I've got Zoom open for some reason. Okay. End meeting. Oh, yes. Let's end this.
Okay.
All right. Am I still with you?
You're still
We're
with me,
good.
dear.
I started um, I started learning piano at the age of 5 and a half.
Mm.
And my parents had taken me over to a friend of theirs' house,
Yeah.
and they said, I don't remember this, but they tell me this. They said that I spent the whole time playing on the piano.
Wow.
And so my father said to my mother, we have to have a piano for her.
Mm-hmm.
And so the lessons started at that point, and I was there taking lessons for about 6 years.
6 years. Uh,
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, I was reading also that at some point you just sort of picked up the guitar and you were self-taught at the time, just something that you were messing around with. And what made you pick up the guitar? Was it your dad's influence?
Well, my father always had instruments in the house, and
Mm-hmm.
he went through. Well, he started off actually on the violin when he
Ah,
was a small in
okay.
Chicago, and then he moved from the violin to the trumpet, and from the trumpet, he played the trumpet in the army band.
Uh-huh.
Allen is also Marshall Allen from Sun Ra was on
Wow.
the same band. That's a little piece of history. And
Interesting.
so after that, he started playing the guitar.
Okay.
And so that's the first instrument I remember him having in the home. And I was always fascinated with the guitar that he had because it was a Gibson arch top.
Mm.
The arch top has the strings that hang over the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And I would, I remember playing with that. One of my first memories of music really was just playing with those strings that overhang on the bridge. They make harmonics.
Wow.
There's no it's not the same thing as playing the other part of the guitar. It's like just little tiny tinkle, tinkle, tinkle noises.
Right, right. Interesting. So, I was reading that you were writing your own songs at a very early age. Can you remember the first song that you ever wrote?
No,
Okay.
I I can't because I actually started writing songs. We would play a game in our neighborhood,
Uh-huh.
and the game was who could make up the most original melody and
Okay.
create a song.
Mm-hmm.
And we were playing those games like I was 7, 8 years old. And
Okay.
so those were original pieces that I'll never be able to remember what they were.
Mm-hmm.
But I think uh, the first real song that I wrote was on the guitar. And
Oh,
so it was when I was around 11 or 12.
11 or 12. Now, did you do a little bit of acting? Because I understand that you played Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz in some play. Tell me about that.
There's, Dorothy stays with me. There's
Uh-huh.
no place like home. There's no place.
Right, right, right.
Yeah, I it was a it was not long after the high schools had been desegregated.
Mm-hmm.
So this was one of the first plays that had a mixed, cast.
Okay.
And so they cast me as Dorothy, and it was really an interesting experiment, to see how we could all work together,
Mm-hmm.
black and
Yeah.
in this context, and it really worked. It worked very well.
Interesting. So this would have been, I guess, in the 60s. That was a very turbulent time, living in the South during that time period.
Actually, hold up, this would have been around 1970,
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
1970. When was it? 1972.
72. Okay, early 70s. Okay. Now, as far as college, you were still singing in college. Did you get hooked up with various bands during that time period?
No, I didn't.
Really?
And no, not at all. Because my mother really at the time did not see a future for me in music.
Ah, okay.
And so she didn't really encourage that. She suggested that I have a liberal arts education, which I started at Millsaps College, which is a liberal
Mm-hmm.
arts.
Mm-hmm.
then from there, I started to get back into the music because it was just a weird experience for me.
Right.
At,
Right.
uh, I was studying philosophy and
Philosophy. Interesting.
yeah, and
Wow.
theater art. Yeah,
Okay.
and I dropped out, and that's when I began to get back into the music. Was when I dropped out of the first time I went to college.
Yeah. Yeah. So early 80s, you moved to New York.
Yes.
And I guess not too long after that, you met Steve Coleman and hooked up with M Bass. That whole thing. How did that whole thing come about? Tell me about that.
Oh wow, it was Steve and I met at a Charlie Parker. Uh, I guess it was some sort of memorial type gig,
Hmm.
and it in Soho. It was with Ross Townsend and Bob Cunningham.
Okay.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Bobby Watts may have been on that gig as well.
Okay.
And so we met because Bob Cunningham had been, I'd been sitting in with him doing some gigs,
Hmm.
and he knew that I really loved Charlie Parker. And so it was strange, and he asked me to come sit in, and they called Cherokee.
Yeah, Cherokee. Hmm. Wow.
And Steve was amazed that I knew Cherokee and that I had some idea of what Bird Solo was.
It's not an easy song to sing.
It's
Yeah.
practically impossible,
Yeah. Wow.
So, so that's how we connected. We had a long conversation afterwards, and we talked about Bird and the importance of learning,
Mm-hmm.
the math. But he said at some point you have to create your own voice.
Yeah. Yeah. You, you were working with some really creative musicians during that time. I mean, Greg Osby, pianist Jerry Allen. Now, how did you get to work with Henry Threadgill? That guy's a genius.
he's he's beyond genius. Uh, uh, I think that that group, the AACM, that
Hmm.
Henry was a part of, is kind of what Embase is based on, if you
Right.
will.
Right.
Uh, Bag was there at the time, the I forget what that means, Bag, but it was a group out of St. Louis.
St. Louis.
St.
Okay.
Louis. The AACM was very prominent at the time, and we were just the younglings, coming up, the youngins that were just going out, hanging around at their gigs, trying to get as much information about their path and what they were doing in order for us to shape our own direction.
Hmm.
And so
Interesting.
that's how I met Henry.
Wow. So let's move a little forward. 1986, I believe you came up with your first recording, Point of View.
Yes.
Wow, that was a very interesting record too. I still think I have that on cassette somewhere in my collection. Yeah, and but I know you and I believe singer Diane Reeves. You guys kind of were coming up at the same time too, because she was really starting to hit around that time as well too. But no one really sounded like you. You had such a distinct sound. I'm like, wow, who is this? I said, man, she's got a really nice sound, very creative. And I started looking, more into your background. But I noticed mid 80s, or especially when you moved into the early 90s, once you got on Blue Note, your
Mhm.
career just boom, you know.
Yeah.
What was it about that label? Did you find that that label was very accepting what you were doing creatively and musically? Because that period, especially late 80s, early 90s, Blue Note really had some great artists and some really good stuff going on. Tell us about that period working on Blue Note. What was that like for you?
It was magical. And I have to acknowledge Bruce Lunbaugh.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, we lost him a few years ago, I believe, something like that. Yeah, Bruce. Yeah. Wow.
Bruce Lunbaugh was the last of the real record men, who was so so much involved in the music. He knew all the tunes. He called
Mhm.
tunes that were so rare and strange and bizarre. And that's what impressed me about signing with him. That's what
Mhm.
made me sign with him was because of his knowledge of the music
Mhm.
and so open. to whatever it is you felt was closest to your heart.
Mm,
That's what made him a great record man. He was able to listen to your music and say to you honestly, this makes sense or this doesn't make sense.
mm.
He's that kind of a guy.
Wow.
And so very exciting period, moving from M-bass into this other totally textural um, landscape, musical landscape.
You know, one of my favorite recordings, two of my favorite recordings by you, and I still play them, is a New Moon Daughter and Traveling Miles. New Moon Daughter is a favorite of mine. Now, was that your first Grammy off of New Moon Daughter?
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
it was.
that was great stuff that you guys were doing during that time period. Now, do you? I was just going to say, periodically, do you like to? I mean, do you do any more projects with Steve Coleman, Greg Osby, any of those guys? Do you ever go back? Let me ask you this: does Embase still exist? Do they still are they still playing that type of music still?
Well, Steve still has his band, and he
Okay,
still works with that group, his group called Five Elements, which
interesting.
is, that's that band that's been going on since the mid '80s. He's
Interesting.
always, um, but we don't really have the opportunity to get together and play.
Yeah.
We talk, we have conversations. I'm still real tight with Terry Lynn Carrington.
Oh, yeah. Fantastic drummer. Yeah, she's great. She's great.
It's,
Yeah. I was going to ask you, what was it like working with Luther Vandross? That song that you did with him.
I'm only human, baby. It was amazing. He's just such an icon. When you get into a studio with somebody like that, of course, you may feel a little intimidated, and I was intimidated at first, but he put me at ease, and he actually gave me very good direction
Okay.
on how to sing with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
I couldn't just bring my way of singing into his world,
Right.
and
Right.
he was very firm, but he was very engaging and loving, and it
Mhm.
was a wonderful experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, Cassandra, tell me a little bit about the work that you did with Wynton Marsalis, that Blood on the Fields.
There was blood on the fields.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
was blood. There was blood on the bandstand.
Hmm.
It was such an ambitious project. I think that everybody wanted it to work,
Yeah.
because it was so ambitious. And Winton had written all of this material. I
Hmm.
remember when we first started it, we were both doing a gig in St. Vincent
Hmm.
and down in the near the Grenadines. And I had my group, and he had his. I think it was the septet.
Wow.
I can't recall. But we were both there, and I remember him talking about how he was writing the music from his head. I
Uh-huh.
said, "You don't have a piano or you don't have a keyboard or anything that you're working with?" He said, "No, I'm doing it from my head." And I said, "Okay, good
Mm.
luck with
Yeah.
that." But it was remarkable to see the breadth of his talent, his
Hmm.
with which he was able to write music, compose music on the paper, and it come to life, in the rehearsals.
Yeah. And Terrence Blanchard is a lot like that too. Genius. As a composer, he's brilliant. Some of the stuff that he's done. Now, you did something, a special project in 2015, where you released. It was like a tribute to Billie Holiday, and it was like on the 100 year. I think it was like her birthday, 2015. She would have been 100 years old. Tell me about that project.
Wow, that was a crazy project.
Really?
Um, yeah, wild. Los Angeles is a strange place for me. I got to be honest. So, but we did it over a period of 2 weeks. Laid the
Two weeks.
track, and these were musicians from it was a combination of musicians from the Bad Seed
Okay.
and my musicians, John Coward and Kevin Bright.
Yeah.
Um, and it was an interesting meeting of minds, musical minds.
Mm.
Uh, Steve, what's his name? Nick Launay was the producer of it. You know,
Hmm.
he's Nick's usual producer, the bad.
Mm.
And so that we just tried some radical things. And
Hmm.
I'm all about that. I love to experiment with music. I think, it's important to just test yourself and challenge yourself and, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Well, a couple of weeks ago, I was very pleased to see that Berklee College of Music gave you an honorary doctorate. I watched that. I saw some of those songs. I believe it was yourself, and I saw um, John Legend, and if I'm not mistaken, was it Sheila E. too? A few of you
yeah,
guys, yeah. And tell us about that. That was awesome.
it was so beautiful. I thought the way that they pulled everything together and at the
Hmm.
last, the way that they were able to do that
Yeah,
blew my mind. I watched it several times and really enjoyed it. It was such a great honor. I wish that we could have done it in person,
yeah, I
but
know.
you know what I mean? It
I
would have
bet.
been nice.
Oh yeah, gosh, it definitely would have been. And I've talked to countless musicians. They're just so anxious to get back out there, and they're like, "Gosh, this COVID-19." I was interviewing Ralph Johnson of Earth, Wind, and Fire last week, and he's like, "Man, this is really getting on my nerves, this quarantine thing." But
Mm.
definitely, if it was in person, it would have been something. Now, I was going to ask you, is there anyone out there that you see, Cassandra, any young artists that you're like looking at, and like, boy, this person has like a lot of talent, and that you're maybe watching and you see, them coming up like this person's got a bright future ahead of them? Any particular artist that you're looking at right now? And it doesn't even have to be in jazz, but you're watching and saying, a lot of talent there, a lot of talent. I see a bright future.
I see several people.
Hmm.
I'm actually working with a few vocalists.
Okay.
I'm doing a workshop called Jazz Vocal Expression with a few,
Hmm.
and I'm surprised by the talent that is out there.
Hmm.
Um, I think maybe I got lucky or something, but every one of them is distinct. Every
Yeah.
one of them has a distinctive voice.
Hmm.
They have very interesting ideas about what they want to sing, and I'm just hoping to be able to help them to birth whatever that unique style and voice is. I can't tell you their names because it's like what do they call it, the between you and your doctor. What is that called? um
Was that some type of client confidentiality or something like that? Or yeah, yeah,
Confidentiality. I have to
sure.
but yeah, there's some other singers that I absolutely adore. Dara Tucker from out of she used to be from out of Nashville. I think she's in New Jersey. She
Okay.
has the voice of an angel. I mean, it's just pristine. And she's singing standards, she's singing her original music. Absolutely stunning.
Wow.
There's also Tanya Boyd Cannon. Now,
Hmm.
these are singers that we showcased at the Yellow Scar, which was a
Okay.
spot I had down in Jackson, Mississippi for a while.
Okay. Okay.
I
Interesting.
also I like Hanka G. Hanka, I should say that correctly. Hanka G is from Slovakia, and
Hmm.
she's interpreting her folk music. She's putting jazz treatments on her folk music. So she's a real powerhouse. Somebody to watch.
Mm. And Cassandra, what are you working on? Any projects or any upcoming recordings that you're involved in? Because knowing you, I'm sure you being home quarantine, you got that guitar you're playing. Because I'm always looking at you on Facebook or something. She's doing something. She's definitely doing something. But I'm just curious, what you're working on, what we can expect from Cassandra Wilson. You know.
Well, there are a couple of projects that I'm working on. There's a recording that I did. When was it? Year before last, or was it last year? Time is strange right now, so it's hard for me to say. But I did it out in Las Vegas, and that was with my regular band.
Mm-hmm.
And so we when the when the virus hit, that was the time I was supposed to go in for the mix and the mastering of it.
Mm.
That's something you have to really do in person, especially the mastering.
Right. Right.
So that's moving along, but slowly. We have to work our way around it. And there's another project that I finished right before the virus hit, and that was done in Texas. And
Okay.
it's like an Americana type
Yeah.
twist with some classic Americana songs. And so that's also in the pipeline.
Fantastic. I really enjoyed your performance. I was thinking when I went to the Kennedy Center for the Herbie Hancock competition for guitars, I believe, in December, I thought
Mhm.
you and Liz Wright were just the best thing there. I was sitting all the way up front and I was like, man, look at Cassandra. Just always just on point, so classy. And I was just so excited to see you perform. I think the last time I saw you was a number of years ago at the Kennedy Center. And Dee Dee is always there. I always see Dee Dee Bridgewater. But no, it was fantastic. And I just want to say to thank you for this interview today. You're one of my favorites. You're a class act. Please continue making the great music that you're doing. And as the saying goes, if the music grooves and makes you move, it must be jazz. I'm Preston Williams with Jazz Talk signing off. Peace.